All right. Welcome back, everybody. This is our final major session of the day. We have Juan, Georgie, Vijay, and Sam to talk about the testing toolkit and other updates. So, Sam, I'll pass it over to you.
Thank you, Simeon. Welcome, everyone, again. We'll talk about one of the most the exciting tools present in the Mojo Loop ecosystem. So today we'll go over some TTK updates overview. As usual with the core session and this one, we wanted to focus more on showing what's there, whether it is demonstrations or navigating through the documentation that is available instead of speaking through the slides. So we'll continue that pattern here as well. So Vijay will walk us through the enhancements we were able to do in Payee 15, and then we'll do some demos between Vijay and Georgi. Then Juan will talk about the payment manager and TT testing toolkit. And then we'll have Evan talk about payment manager updates. We'll wrap up with the TTK roadmap there. As usual, wanted to start off with where we started off the Payee 15 with. These were some of the goals we had. Actually, these were all of the goals, sorry. We wanted to publish the Mojo Loop training program course for the testing toolkit, and wanted the testing toolkit to be part of Mojo Loop Helm charts where testing is automated. And I wanted to increase the reliability and test coverage for the tests that we have. And then wanted to stabilize the hosted mode of the testing toolkit. We'll walk through each of these in detail, but for the testing toolkit stream, I'm glad to share that we've accomplished all of this. So the publishing part on the Mojo Loop training program is not yet done, but it is in review with the MTP team, and we've addressed any feedback that we may have, that they may have. So we'll continue prioritizing that, but it is done mostly from the team's side. The testing toolkit is indeed part of the Mojo Loop Helm charts, and we have Helm test features available, which automatically test along with post-install hooks that were provided earlier. The reliability and coverage is also increased, which I will cover that. And then the hosted mode will cover that as well. So we were able to achieve all of these, and we'll now go into details later on. Quickly, before that, we wanted to see the teams that were using the testing toolkit. We have the Mojo Loop releases and the core maintenance team using the testing toolkit on a daily basis for QA validation. And as I was mentioning, Helm test and even cron jobs that run daily on dev and QA deployments. Then we have the Dfsp workstream using it. We have a workstream that were developing adapters for ATM and POS, ISO 8583 based APIs. They were using the testing toolkit as well. I have several Mojo Loop support teams for implementation projects using testing toolkit. Even Mawali wanted to start using the testing toolkit, so that's another welcome update. We have several Mojo Loop product teams using testing toolkit and several hackathons, HiPeople hackathon recently, and then the DFS lab prior to that, along with the ISO 20022 hackathons have been using testing toolkit in some way or another. And then Vijay will cover one of the use case that was used as a POC as well. The team here, I think we have 4 or 5 of us presenting today. Vijay, Juan, myself, Georgi, and Evan, but there are many more contributors, as you can see. Emerson helped a lot with our increasing our test coverage, parameterizing tests, and merging collections when we had separate collections, things like that. Then Georgi and Kevin specific to the testing toolkit, along with Vijay. And we have Juan and Evan working on the payment manager core connector side of things, along with the testing toolkit. Luis and Kevin, of course, enriching the TTK and using it in the PSP, while also adding features needed to support that as well. Matt and Michael providing general direction and support in roadmap planning. And of course, Miguel, as usual, with reviews, designs, and automating things in the Moduloop releases and Moduloop charts from the TTK, and of course, Vijay leading all of this. So the TTK training program, which we hope will be published soon, is focused on the usage of the testing toolkit. It's currently in the review stage, as I've mentioned before. And we want this to be a course where people can get started quickly and also look up the use case that they're interested in and start using the toolkit that way. When it is published, I'm sure the Moduloop Foundation, Simeon and others will share that publicly, and you can start using that. With that, I'll stop sharing and pass on to Vijay to cover the features enhancements done in the past PI and take it from there.
Thank you, Sam. Let me share my screen. Can you see my screen?
Yes, Vijay.
The slideshow is not loading. So in the testing toolkit, in this PI, we added few features like grouping test cases. So now we can assign labels to the test cases to group them. We can assign multiple labels to a single test case, just like as in GenHub. We can create labels and assign them to the test cases so that we can filter them using labels, and also we can get the label information in the reports. And the next feature is Payee mobile simulator. I recently inquired about if we have any Payee side mobile simulator to show an inbound transfer to a Dfsp. So I could not find anything like that. So I added a feature to the testing toolkit UI to simulate that Dfsp mobile Payee app. So we can get a mobile application in the browser, and if we send the transfer to the testing toolkit like a Dfsp, then we can show the inbound transfer in that mobile simulator, and also we can show the updated balances and transaction history. So I will show that in the demo. And then improvements. We are working towards combining the CGS collection with the existing Golden Path collection, which is deferred settlement model. So we are combining them, both provisioning and Golden Path. So we will have a single testing toolkit collection to test all the settlement models. So most work is done. So we will roll out a release on that. Then parameterize variables. So in the default Moduloop Helm chart, the FSP names are like payer, Payee, payer FSP, Payee FSP, and some test FSPs. So we parameterized that. So if someone wants to change those names, we can change them in the environment, and we can run the test cases. And we added an FX API, which is not implemented yet, but we added for testing purpose. And several improvements in the testing toolkit hosted mode, and some bug fixes. So let's jump into demos. So first one is hosted mode. We did several improvements in the testing toolkit hosted mode. So a hosted mode is for schemes if they want to host the testing toolkit on their server and give credentials to their DFSPs. So we can enable hosted mode in testing toolkit, and we can integrate with a identity management server like Keycloak. So that feature was there in the Helm chart, but recently we provided the Docker Compose files for that. So we can spin up a virtual machine and we can host the testing toolkit easily. So we have all the services to run the testing toolkit in hosted mode like Keycloak, MongoDB, and also with TLS, we are using Connection Manager for the certificate exchange. So we provided two Docker Compose files for the hosted mode. And Payee app simulator, let's see that in action. So here I'm running testing toolkit and two scheme adapters to simulate two Dfsps, and I configure testing toolkit as a core connector behind a scheme adapter. So testing toolkit is running on 6660, and in the demos we can click on Payee app simulator. Here we can customize this logo. We have a login screen, and this logo we can customize it using the Docker environment variables. If we log in, we can get the account balance of this participant, of this party. And let's send it inbound transfer. Okay, I'm executing inbound transfer from another screen. Observe the notification here. Received amount $100 and the updated balance and the transaction history. Let me send another transfer. You can see the notification and updated balance. So this URL can be opened in mobile also. So it will be useful for demonstrating the Moja loop or something like a real mobile application. And with that, I will pass it to Georgi. He's going to demo the labeling functionality. Georgi, over to you.
Yeah, thanks. What's my screen?
We can see it now. Okay, okay.
Yeah. Can you hear me? I was the connection for a moment. Can you hear me?
Yeah, yeah. We can hear you, Georgi. Go ahead.
Okay. So, yeah, we added the option to group test cases by labels. So we created 3 labels. Now, those are settlements and quotes. So when we select the label, those test cases that are assigned with this label are automatically selected. And now we can see test cases from it. we can select multiple labels, and also we can assign new labels to those test cases. For example, we can select P2P, and now these test cases from these files here are added to the template. Yeah, those labels are predefined, so we can create them, and then here we can see what options we have. And if the test cases are assigned with these labels, then we can select them and run the test case. And that's pretty much with this.
Thanks, Gabby. Let me share this.
Yeah, I can give the ball to Vijay to continue.
Can you see my screen?
Not yet, Vijay. We can see you, but not the screen.
Now?
Yes.
Okay. So we closely worked with payment manager team to combine the testing toolkit, to use the testing toolkit in the core connector development. So there is a repository here in the PM4ML on-premise deploy, which is a public repository. So core connector developers can spin up the local instance of payment manager combined with testing toolkit now. So we added testing toolkit. Here, this is the payment manager, which includes multiple components. And the payment manager sends request to testing toolkit instead of a real Mojo loop switch. So here we are simulating a real Mojo loop switch with the testing toolkit in a local machine of the developer. So the core connector developer can initiate a transaction from the to the payment manager, and the payment manager will get proper callbacks, asynchronous callbacks from the testing toolkit to test the end-to-end functionality. So let's run the Docker Compose script provided in the on-premise deploy. So you can see all the payment manager components like Mojo loop connectors, core connectors, and front ends and all, including testing toolkit, are up now. Let's wait for a few seconds. Juan will go through this payment manager and testing toolkit in detail. I will just show you the working of this. Okay, it is up now. Testing toolkit is running on 6060. And let's put it in monitoring mode and initiate a transaction to the payment manager. So to initiate a transaction, here in the README file, you can get the call command, which triggers the transaction to the simulated core connector. So copy this command and execute in the terminal. Uh, Okay, it seems the auto acceptance is enabled. So that's why we got only put parties from the testing toolkit. So if we enable that, the transfer will be successful with the quotes and transfer. So you can use this on-premise deploy repository to spin up the payment manager on your machine. And also you can see the all the inbound and outbound transfers through the payment manager portal. So you can open the portal here on this port and log in with the default test and test. Then you will see the transactions there in the portal. So let me try to fix this. Or let's see the portal. So this is payment manager portal. You go to transfers, and you can find 2 transfers are pending because of that auto acceptance flag. The pending transactions are here. And you can see all the details about a transaction. I think for pending transaction, we cannot see any detail. Let me enable those flags or rerun the payment manager, and we can see the successful transactions. I think it is up. Let's go to testing toolkit monitoring page. Clear this and execute a transfer. Yeah, now we see the committed message here. And we can see all the inbound requests, parties, ports, and transfers. We can look at the inbound requests that the payment manager is sending and also the responses. These are the simulated callbacks from the testing toolkit. let's see the transaction in the payment manager. Login with test and test. So you can see the status is success now and all the information related to the transfer. These are the basic details, and then the technical details, you can see all the requests and responses. So to use this, you don't need to configure anything. You just download this and Docker Compose up. This will set up all the necessary credentials. It will create the test and test to access the UI in the key cloud. So yeah, that's it from me, and Juan will elaborate on these use cases. Thank you. Are there any questions, by the way?
Thanks, Vijay. Let me start sharing. Juan, please feel free to start presenting.
Thank you, Vijay. Okay. So in this slide, we can see a base Moja loop transfer. Starting in the middle, we see the Moja loop hub. And this is your typical scenario. It could be a peer-to-peer transaction. It could be loan repayment, loan disbursement. But at the end of the day, we have two Dfsps. In this case, on the left, we have the payer. On the right-hand side, we have the payee. The idea of this slide is to show you the bigger picture before I start dissecting and showing where TTK and on-premise PM4ML come into the picture. So we can see the demarcation in blue on both sides, the payment manager. And within that, we can see the core connector, which is the integration point for the different Dfsps, depending on the use case. Next slide, please. So in this presentation, we're going to talk how we can leverage the TTK that we are well aware of for the integration with the different Dfsps via the payment manager. Specifically leveraging the on-premise PM4ML that Vijay was just showing the GitHub repo for. With this setup, a core connector developer, or I'll show you in a second, a Dfsp client developer can have these components set up locally to develop their corresponding work. Next slide, please. We're already familiar with the TTK. Vijay already went over the on-premise deploy GitHub repo containing the Docker Compose file. And here for reference as well, there is the documentation to the core connector development. Sam, let me show my screen really quickly though.
Go ahead. We can see the matrix, but yeah, now
I'm just showing the wrong screen now.
Yeah, we can go ahead.
Guess I should have just had that screen. So this is the on-premise deployed repo that contains the Docker Compose instructions. I just wanted to show what we would do if we need to swap the core connector simulator for an image. In here, we have the simulator that Vijay was showing, but as a core connector developer, part of your workflow is developing a Docker image with the Apache Camel core connector. And by replacing the similar core connector with your image, you would be able to test that locally. Then going back to the presentation, so I think we left off here. That's the base for the for where the advantages of using those two in tandem work. The first use case that I want to present is when we're developing the Payee core connector. Usually or ideally, we would have access to a Mojaloup lab, but we might not have access for multiple reasons, or simply we want to develop everything locally before testing against a real lab. So that's where the TTK comes in, and it can simulate a Mojaloup hub. So this will allow for the Payee core connector development. Prior to TTK, we were studying development with what we call component-to-component development. And in a lot of occasions, we just have to simulate the edges. But with the TTK, we can go farther and simulate close to the end-to-end testing, which is the last use case I want to show. And then the next use case is Payee core connector development. Usually on this side of things, the core connector is a client to a backend. Depending on the Dfsps, they call them core banking systems or financial management systems. For the most part, we have dealt with REST API base core backends. A lot of times, depending on the Dfsp, we receive a YAML, we receive a request and response JSON. Sometimes we're lucky, and from the get-go, we obtain a sandbox with credentials and test data. But most of the time, that's not the case. And having something like the TTK in place that can simulate that to allow core connector development and not only test the happy path, but test things like error cases goes a long way. So that's the second scenario. The third use case in that bigger picture is for the Dfsp client developer. So on the payer side, the core connector exposes an API to send money. The Dfsp needs to develop a mobile application, a USSD application, a regular website that will eventually call the send money API. Sometimes directly, sometimes they do have integration framework, an ESB in place. But ultimately, we need to provide them a sandbox for them to be able to call and develop that client. So we can now give them an on-premise PM4ML along with TTK for them to develop that client against. In the past, again, going with the component to component, we were just simply providing a core connector jar file with hard-coded responses for the happy path. Now, we can provide an on-premise PM4ML along with the TTK, and it improves highly the confidence level for that developer that can test an array of scenarios beyond the happy path. And finally, we can use TTK to enable end-to-end testing. So after we have gone through those three first use cases and build those independent pieces, we can now put them together. And if we don't have access to a Moja Loop lab, or we simply want to lightly test in our laptops, not everybody has a laptop that will allow them to run Moja Loop lab, as we know. So it's good to have this level of confidence and be able to test end-to-end and not component to component, because there's always in integration, there's always a layer or boundary that needs to be tested end-to-end to find what's happening. So this completes the picture in terms of allowing core connector development. At this point, we can take some questions around these slides and use cases. If there are no questions, Sam, go ahead.
Thanks, Juan. This is very helpful. So this is a continuation of what we've seen previously as well, with the Payee team and several other teams showcasing how they were able to leverage TTK for mocking services to accelerate development overall. And one particularly was directly involved with developing adapters like for core connector based on many different core banking solutions. So there is a lot of real world experience. So thank you for sharing that one. Vijay, can we maybe look at one of the test reports, or shall I share and maybe you can walk through that?
Okay.
So this is following some of our goals. So we know that we are not seeing too many. This is definitely greater than where we started off with. But there are some enhancements that happen, like parameterization. And we do have a set of collections. There used to be two different collections, test collections, golden path test collections, based on two settlement models. One for the basic or deferred settlement, and another collection for continuous gross settlement. But now we have work underway, as Vijay shared previously, where those were merged. And here is a sample test case testing toolkit report. This is one from Slack notification. Vijay, do you want to walk through that, showing the Slack notification and maybe a report as well?
Yeah. So there is another report here, definition report. So the test run report Sam showed us is the result of a test run. But if we want to get a report about the test cases covered in the testing toolkit with proper descriptions for business users, so we have a download definition option here. We need to load the test collections, and it will render a report, HTML report, which consists of all the information about each test case. So you can see all the descriptions here and the expected results. So this report will be rendered based on the existing test cases. So we don't need to edit the report every time when we update the test cases. So it will be automatically generated. And as the follow-up stories for grouping, we are going to include the labels here. So suppose if we have some labels about some business use case like settlements, if we select that settlements, then we will get only settlements definitions. So that's about the definition report. Sam, do you want to add anything?
Thanks, Vijay. I wanted to show those two because those were a couple of goals that we discussed initially, part of the product deck. If Juan and Vijay, if you are done, I think we are done for today's session. We can have a few minutes for any questions and answers. So we've answered this in chat, but Vijay, do you want to address this question from Shri? When TTK acts as the Payee core banking solution, can we simulate to send responses for different error cases?
I think Juan can answer this. Juan, I think we already handled this, right?
So this is just when the TTK is emulating an API. So it will be, it doesn't have to be specific to this use case. It's just a TTK capability. I think, like Paul was answering, there are ways to have rules to send different responses based on the certain requests.
Okay. If we have time, I can share the screen and walk through the error case scenario. How much time we have left?
We have 9 minutes. Even is it okay to continue?
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Okay, go ahead, Vijay.
Okay. Let me check if the payment manager, okay, it's running. So if we initiate a request from payment manager to testing toolkit, it's a success use case. Yeah, we got committed, right? So if we want to simulate error use case, then we need to add the validation rule here. Add a new rule. Validation rule, sorry. Synchronous response rule. Add a new rule for the Loop simulator, I think.
Shri was asking about the core banking system, but in general, I think that applies across the board for the TTK. The TTK can generate error responses for any given API that is simulating, right?
Yeah. I thought that was the question. To simulate error responses using testing toolkit. Isn't it the actual question, Sri?
Yeah, that's right, Vijay.
Okay. So
generating the error response from the core banking system when TTK is acting as the pay side CBS. Yeah.
okay.
Currently, in our simulators, we can add the rules to do that to create multiple error scenarios. So the same capability is there in the TTK or not? That's what my question.
Yeah, same capability is there. So here in the synchronous response rules, we need to create rules for error cases. So when we select some endpoint here, I think this is the payment manager or outbound. Okay, so if we want to throw an error when the core connector gets transfer, post transfers, then we can select that. And we can throw an error here. Instead of 200, we can throw error. And also the status message, status code and the message. Then a transaction will be failed.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, it's good that we can even put the status code and messages as needed. Yeah.
So I'm not sure which API we are using now to simulate the core banking, but if we select the proper API, then the transaction should fail.
Okay. Yep. Thanks, Vijay. This cleared my question.
Thank you.
Thanks, Vijay. I have one comment about a payment manager. So we'll continue this discussion and build on that. So we've raised a request for a roadmap planning session where we can talk about the payment manager testing toolkit. Those kind of tools that facilitate participation, not just onboarding, but also essentially use them as Mojo Loop support, Mojo Loop FSP support tools. So we'll continue that session there if it is confirmed. We'll have Yevon, who's the owner on Payment Manager, be part of that, along with Juan and Vijay as well.
Thanks, everyone.
If there are no further questions, yeah, thank you.
Thank you.